Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back. Hey everybody, welcome back to Live from the Heartland. And as I said before at the end of the banter, our next guest is someone that many of you who listen to the show on a regular basis for many years know, the one and only Katy Hogan, my longtime business partner and very close friend in the Heartland Cafe, longtime co-host of the show here, and we love having her whenever we can get her. And she is still a producer of this show. And one of the things that people should know about Katy Hogan is she's always had an urge to travel. And she's done a lot of it. She's been to Mexico. She's been to Europe. She's been a lot of places. I'll let her tell you. But ever since I know her, she was going off on adventures, a lot of excitement, saw a lot of things, had a lot of close calls. And most recently, uh, she told us a long time ago she was going to go off to Spain and walk the Camino. And, it seemed like a long time away. And then all of a sudden it got to be a week, few days, and she went and now she's back. And I think we did have a brief report on her trip when she first got back, but this is going to be a Katy Hogan travelogue about her experiences just recently over in Spain. So hello to you, Katy Hogan.
Hello, Michael James. Nice to see you, Pard. I don't
Yes.
think I've been on since I came home from the Camino. I think I was on before I left.
Well, we can always check, but that's good because we don't want people that had heard any of this before.
Exactly.
This is a lot of new material.
I hope so.
Tell us about your ongoing desire to travel and go places and do things. Because ever since I've known you, you've taken off. And before I knew you, had done some of that too.
That's right. Travel. It's, we don't need to really go into it deeply. Travel is a great gift. And for those of us in the United States, if we can travel outside of the United States, it's a double gift because we need, as people sitting in the mothership, as it were, that we are, we need to know what the rest of the world sees when they look at the U.S. And that was one of the great lessons that started for me when I first went to Mexico as a student back in 1970. And, once I saw that, one, they got different news than we did, but also they got a news that looks at the U.S. as the other or that big thing. It was it was an eye opener. So yeah, I've been absolutely fortunate to do an immense amount of travel. And one of the things that I have emphasized in travel is some sort of spiritual retreat or personal life development, and keeping in track of what is the soul of all of us and of us individually. So the Camino represented a thing that I had known about for many, many years, like 40 years. And it got more popular, certainly in the last 10 or 15 years. One of the reasons was that movie called The Way, really good flick, did show a way of doing the way. So what I did, first of all, I want to say I only did part of the Camino. I did 110 kilometers of the Camino, which is actually 800 kilometers total of the path that I use, which is the Camino Francés, which starts just outside of Spain in France, right before you start with the Pyrenees. So the full Camino is quite a feat. And I hurry to say that is not the feat I pulled off. Nonetheless, having said that, the Camino is the Camino. And once you're on it, you're on it. And the magic of it comes to you even if you're only doing 5 to 10 miles a day, which is what our group did, instead of the 3 times that the folks who are doing the long haul do, which is they do anywhere from 10 to 30 miles a day, even at times, in order to get through it. So I had a very different experience. Before I left, was making a glib joke about it and describing to people I'm doing the bougie Camino because hotel rooms or rooms in casitas planned for us ahead of time. We had meals there all covered ahead of time. So the real Camino, doing the real Camino as a pilgrim from the very beginning means you often don't know where you're sleeping that night. And that can cause a little bit of anxiety as you get more and more tired and wonder where will you rest yourself. So our group, which was all over 50 years old, well, there was one gal who was pushing 50. But for us, this was a real treat. The setup put together by the folks at Ananda Travel, Expanding Light, they call it. This is the reason I chose them. Each day, we would start with meditation in the dark. We would pat ourselves down to whatever room we had at that location to sit in silence. We would do a little bit of chanting and then silence for about 20 minutes, not a long meditation, but absolutely effective. And then we would eat breakfast together. Every single time we sat down to breakfast or dinner, we sang our grace, which those of us who didn't know the words or whatever, we learned it real quick within a couple days. And such a sweet thing, but a little bit, some people were a little concerned that we were doing this in open dining rooms that included other guests and maybe other pilgrims. That discomfort went away immediately, because almost immediately, as most of us learned the words and we sang it together, it was a beautiful sound and people would applaud in the dining room. And the other thing we did was we sang to the innkeepers, or the folks who hosted us. We would encircle them out in front of their place before we started our walk and sing them a song that was in thanks for their hospitality and hoping to meet them down the road. I mean, stuff, it would make the innkeeper cry, tear up. And the other thing that happened that was different for us that made it all possible was at the end of each day, if there was room, and most times there was, one of our leaders, Satyana, would lead us in a stretching / yoga thing that would last about 45 minutes that was absolutely healing and allowed us to go on and be strong. So we were on the deluxe Camino trip, I gotta say, because of both the prayer and the exercise. And the other thing I would add too that was extremely important to all of us was every day that we walked, which was all 12 days, we would walk for an hour in silence. We started our walk for an hour not speaking. 201, every one of us thought that was essential for the kind of focus that we were able to give our Camino. But okay, so the history of the Camino.
Let me ask you a couple questions, and then
Yeah.
we can.
Okay.
One of the things was, let me just fire at you. What led you to do this now in your life, and why did you pick that rather than going back to Jamaica or Canada or one of the other places you've gone off to?
Well, the Camino is a very unique and specific and world. It's a UNESCO world site. It's one of the three great pilgrimages according to in Christendom. The others being to Rome, and the one that no one can do right now, the one to Jerusalem. So, and you may say, well, you're not that big of a Catholic, Katy. I mean, what are you doing going on this?
You've definitely been influenced by the Catholic Church.
I mean, I am someone who was raised in Catholicism, so I have the freedom to say what I do and do not, focus on in that. And that doesn't necessarily make me a cafeteria Catholic, although some would say yes. But I'm secure in my starting point with getting in touch with spiritual connection with the cosmos. And the Catholic Church gave me that when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And so I have no problem with that. I have added to it, of course, thanks to Buddhism and Hindu, the Hindus who affected me in my yoga teacher training. So what this was I didn't want to return to Jamaica or somewhere else. I wanted to do this thing. And there's no other way to do this thing and no other way to get what I got from it but go to Spain and do it. And I was thrilled to be in Spain for the first time in my life, and we followed it up with some time in Portugal as well. Go
Let
ahead,
me
ask another question.
be you know, you and I used to, before we opened the Heartland, we were running lots of miles up and down Lake the Front. Uh, we both have done marathons. You broke 4 hours in Germany with a bunch of Olympic athletes, way better
I
time.
love that you always remember that.
Well, it's, I only did about 4:32 or something, and I'm very much humbled by that. Uh, and my daughter has had Casey Blue has a better time too. But I've known you lifting weights. I've known you doing yoga. I've known you doing running. Um, and I watched you get ready for your Camino trek, and you just blew me away. I'd drop you off way on the west side where we were meeting someone in an office, and then you decided to walk back to Rogers Park. 7, 8, 10 miles. You were putting in a lot of miles. Um, and So I was very much impressed with your training. I don't know if you want to say anything about the training and how
Well,
many
that,
miles you actually had to put in each day, et cetera.
well, thank you for all of that. Um, that was part of the reason. That's also part of the draw to me to the Camino was the physical aspect to it. That it would require me to do some training, which it did, and I did from May until I left in September. A lot of walking, as you said, but because again we were doing, our average daily mileage ran between 5 and the low end to 9 or 9.5 on the tall end. So I knew from our marathon days, frankly, that if I could do uh, half of that comfortably any day, I would be fine. So I did I did only 2 or 3 9-mile walks. And I did many, many 6 and 7-mile walks. And I used walking to my job at Gethsemane and back as training as well. So walking is, everything is walking distance as long as you have enough time.
And your muscles don't hurt. I'm having a hard time walking now. I got some pains in my leg. I don't know, but you got to keep walking is the basic thing, and I believe in that. So you went over there with a pal, um, and you how many days did you have in Spain or France or whatever until you
We
start?
started out in Madrid. We had a couple of 3 days to acclimatize ourselves in Madrid, which was a wonderful city to see the Gaudi, the museums there, walking around. I loved it. And I also loved using my Spanish. The friend that would always be very impressed, but that's because she didn't speak any Spanish. And I would be telling her all the times that these Spanish people were saying, "Oh, your Spanish is so good." I would say, "This is all they heard me say," which is like one sentence that said, "Yeah, I'd love to have that bread too," or "Get me what she got." And she'd be like, and they'd be so kind and generous to say, "Oh, you have such good Spanish." And it blew me away every time because they were basing that on like the simplest sentences
I
spoken.
had that same thing. I'll say things like "Viva la gente, todo poder a la gente," and I'll have a couple of phrases that I can whip off, and people think I could speak Spanish pretty well, but I'm really terrible. But
Well, I don't
something
think we have to go to being terrible, but I think that anytime a US citizen goes abroad and actually tries to communicate with the countrymen in their language, the appreciation level is, off the charts because they get so many Americans sitting down going, "I'll have a Coke, please," expecting,
yeah.
that to
Let me
be
ask you, Katie, what do you think has led to so many people doing it? Since you did the Camino, Connie Voisin, the poet, we know she's done it. Friend of mine, Matt, he did it.
Yeah, more than 300,000 people are doing it annually now, which is huge, huge. And I'm not sure I think a lot of people are drawn to getting away from the daily, and that's to me the sweetest thing. To go on one of these things is to not watch TV for a month. It's to not, for me, miss a night sleeping in my bed because I fell asleep on the couch. I slept in a bed every single night. The lights went out and I went to sleep. It was a totally wonderful thing. I ate really well. People in Europe eat better than us. I'm sorry, folks, but that's the case. Their food is closer. It doesn't travel in semis or airplanes for hours or days, and it makes a huge difference. And people were astounded at how much they loved the food. What was the other question? Part of this question, I forgot.
Why
what I'm
people
missing.
were walking?
Oh, why so many? Yeah, why so many? Oh, I think it's the absolute best antidote to life as we know it right now. Just shut off the noise, get away from all of the input and the social media, et cetera, and test yourself. Who do you find when you're out there walking by yourself for hours on end through the beautiful countryside? It's like the central life question to me, that we all seek to get the answer to, and it's one of the few ways we have of doing it that isn't sort of life challenging. I mean, I've done harder things like walk in higher places for periods of time, but the same thing happens. You get to yourself and you get to find out what's there for you, what do you bring home to your people from a thing like this? And I'm still figuring that out.
What did you glean? What's the most important thing you got out of this trip?
To keep doing things like this is important. That
Have you been walking a lot since you came back?
I have continued to walk, not as much, given that it's getting winter, but I walk to work still, and I mean to walk more each day, but I haven't done as much as I might have.
Well, we're gonna have to go out, so I'm gonna ask you two more things. One would
Okay.
be, what are your next plans for vacation, trip, for spiritual enlightenment? Have you got it figured out yet?
I think I'm going to glean spiritual enlightenment from publishing a book with you this year. That's going to be
Next year.
a spiritual trip for me to finish the Heartland book.
Yeah. Can we share with people what we're calling it right now?
No.
Okay, I won't do that. I got one more thing, Katie. Would you be so kind as to sing us the grace right now?
No, I forget the tune.
Oh, geez, because you have a nice voice. You
I
would.
forget the tune. I just read the words the other day, that were in something else. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were going to ask that, or I would have.
Well, that was a secret. I was popping it on you.
Yeah,
Okay,
no,
so,
I can't.
you always have a lot to share. I know you're a political animal, and we are all gearing up for the next 11 months of talking to everybody we can, sharing all the positive things we know are going on,
Yeah,
combating all the lies that are out there.
yeah.
Do you have any parting words to share with the multitude of listeners or viewers to the Live from the Heartland show?
Well, I hope everyone does get involved and understands that, like Liz Cheney said earlier this week with her book published, another term of Trump would be absolutely dangerous to the democracy. And I totally agree with Liz Cheney, and we cannot allow it. So everyone should understand they've tried to separate us. Let's give up on the blue and red bullshit. Excuse me.
Right on. I like that. Give it up.
We're all, Texas isn't a red state. They elected Beto O'Rourke, for gosh sake. We've got voters of every stripe in every state. So let's get them, and let's get them to vote for Biden Harris and leave this hell of Trump behind us forever.
Right on, sister. Thank you, Katy Hogan, for coming on Live from the Heartland.
Thank you, Michael and Hal.